class, I want to introduce you to some organic compounds, what that means and what some of the basics of organic compounds means for us in biology. First, let's start with the title, matter and organic compounds. Matter, as we know, is all of the stuff in the universe, anything that has mass and takes up space. And specifically in this case, we're talking about organic compounds. Compounds, as we know, are made up of a number of the elements in the periodic table bonded together chemically. And in these particular compounds, we're talking about those that are organic in nature, which means they have to do with life. So, organic compounds almost exclusively are all about different molecules of carbon. Carbon bonding with lots of different things. We are said to be carbon-based organisms, as all life on our planet is. And this is why. You may recall that carbon has 4 valence electrons. It has the ability to bond covalently with lots of things because it wants to have 8, right? And it's no easier to get rid of 4 than to gain 4. And so it'll usually share with lots of different things to fill up these 4 available spots for valence electrons. Forms lots of compounds because of it. Some of the important compounds that it forms for life. Let's start with carbohydrates. Carbohydrates, most people will think of as starches or sugars. If you look at nutritional information on crackers, for instance, you will find that a lot of carbohydrates exist, and a lot of people will say that carbs are not the greatest things for you because they end up putting a little too much on you. Well, nutritional information, in this case our carbohydrates, are 18 grams, but it says sugars, 0 grams. So what does that mean? Well, first of all, nutrition, and then as it relates to the structure of our body. Carbohydrates, there are 2 types. There are monosaccharides and polysaccharides. What's the difference between mono and poly? One and many, right? Monosaccharides are what we call simple sugars. These things are great for energy. They don't store energy exceptionally well. Not when they first go into your body. They're either going to get burned up or they're going to get stored, unfortunately, as fat sometimes. Polysaccharides, however, are complex carbohydrates. And complex carbohydrates, like on those crackers, are not going to be considered sugars, but they're still carbohydrates. They also store, more often store energy than give you quick energy right away. And polysaccharides also help with some of the structures of cells, some of the things that help to build a cell. So carbohydrates are considered to be sugars, but there are complex and simple sugars. They relate to the energy in our body, and they also relate to the structure of cells. Secondly, we have lipids. These are lipids, not liquids. Lipids, when I think of lipids, I think of fats. You can also consider them to be oils. Fats and oils that are actually really good sources of energy for us, but you have to get through this before you get to this. To burn fat takes a little bit more. Very energy-packed substance, nutritionally and health-wise, but we tend to store it and don't necessarily use it when we have these around. These are also very important for structures of cells as well, and more importantly of membranes. There are 2 different types of lipids that you're going to see, especially nutritionally when you look at labels. Unsaturated and saturated. If you listen to the news and when you become more health conscious, you definitely hear saturated fats are not good for you. These are important things in moderation, of course, but there are types of lipids that fall into these categories that actually help very much with the structure of our cells. We have things called triglycerides. Triglycerides are basically storage of fat, and it's great for energy, not great if you have high triglyceride levels. There are also things called phospholipids. You can see the phos there, phosphate is what that refers to. Phospholipids are important because they form many membranes in the body, and membranes in cells. Basically what keeps the inside of the cell separate from the outside of the cell, and one part of the cell separate from another. Cell membranes are all about phospholipids, and so essentially fats make those up, and those are important. And then the last type, put it over here, are steroids, which again, all these things seem to be related to nutrition as well as to body function, but steroids are important, and they aid in the building of certain body structures, but they can be abused for those who are maybe trying to build a little too quickly, and they have some very negative health side effects. So carbs and lipids, I'm going to erase this, make a little bit of room. In addition to those, you have proteins. This is the third carbon-based molecule, important organic molecule. Proteins are important. Obviously, they make up muscles. They make up a number of structures in the body, and they do a lot of things. A lot of different activities in the body are related to proteins. There are a lot of different proteins that help to make up a lot of the things that speed up reactions. You may remember from physical science or previous year's science that the things that speed up reactions are called catalysts, and there are a number of important proteins related to this. Proteins are made up of amino acids. Amino acids themselves composed of peptides. When you have a lot of them together, you have what are called polypeptides, these long chains. And these amino acids are very important, obviously, again, for building structures in the body and for many other functions. So just like carbs and lipids, they have to do with the functioning of our body and the energy required, the material required to make it run, but also the material that composes it. And then finally we have, let me move this up a little, we have nucleic acid. Nucleic acids, some of you may recognize or know, is the Na in DNA or RNA, deoxyribonucleic acid or ribonucleic acid. These things are composed of nucleotides, and when you get a lot of them in a chain, we call them polynucleotides. And if you can think of DNA, it's that twisted ladder, that double helical structure. When you have these together and you build up the double helix that is DNA, these nucleic acids in that form carry the genetic material, the genetic information, pardon me, that has the blueprint embedded in it for me or for you. It transmits the genetic material necessary to build an organism, transferred from one cell to another, from one generation to another. That blueprint of what makes me me, that is in my DNA, and that is composed of nucleic acids, polynucleotides. Nucleotides are made up of three things: sugars, a phosphate group, and a nitrogen base. These three things together make up the nucleotides, and as the nucleotides are put together, they make up that DNA or RNAs, single or double helical structure with a single strand or a double strand that carries genetic material. So these all come from carbon. Carbohydrates, proteins, lipids, and nucleotides. All four of them are very important, essential to all life on Earth, and they all come from carbon. They all come from carbon's ability to bond covalently with a lot of different things and to make up these chains. That's what's so vitally important about carbon's 4-valence electron nature. You can get polypeptides and polynucleotides, you can get long chains. And as these chains start to build, we go from what would be considered simple organic compounds like little organisms to very complex compounds, very complex organisms. Without carbon, life as we know it would not exist. We would not have these complex organisms with all of these crazy functions. And of course, as we also have noted in the video, there's a lot of information here related to health as well, because we're constantly taking these things in to continue building and maintaining our body. So carbon is very important. It is the basis of life and the basis of organic compounds.